I call this the Wheel of Consciousness. Actually, this is the Wheel of Consciousness. I made my dad build this. He's not even retired, but he did a really good job. But I drew the picture. The wheel describes 12 naturally occurring states of consciousness that most of us pass through at one time or another in our waking, sleeping, and dreaming lives. The fact that we're barely aware of them doesn't mean they aren't incredibly strange and surprising. They are. It just means our ability to form certain kinds of memory is either disengaged, or with our very human tendency to move through the world on automatic, we're just too busy or distracted to notice the real texture of our awareness. For the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through a very brief tour through your minds. I'm going to focus more on sleeping consciousness, both because of time constraints, but also because for many of us, these states are not as well known. Plus, I love sleeping. And so that's why I'm focused on that. But I can tell you that the head trip I detail in my book, the head trip, in fact, which all of us go through all of the time, is 24 hours long. And the waking mind is every bit as exotic as the sleep and dreaming one. So, let's start our tour. Every night as we fall asleep, we move through a tunnel. Though disconnected sounds may occasionally make it through, the external world slowly recedes. We're moving towards sleep, but to get there, we first have to pass from the tunnel to the gate. It's called the sensory gateway, and it's incredibly important. This gate marks the primary dividing line of consciousness. On one side of the gate, the waking side, we move through a world constructed entirely from sensory input. On the other side, the sleep and dreaming side, we move through a world constructed from memory and experience. We call this dreaming. You might say that in waking, our minds are constrained by the real world. But on the other side, the sleeping and dreaming side, the sensory input is removed, and our minds have a tendency to become untethered. It's supposed to key to the next part, just hold on a second. Me metaphorically walking to the other side of the mind. All right. Welcome to the hypnagogic, the first state on the sleep side of the divide. The important thing to realize here is that consciousness doesn't just suddenly cut out when we fall asleep. It just changes shape. The rational thread from waking begins to stretch and fray, and then it snaps, unleashing all kinds of strange thoughts and associations. This is why as you drift off to sleep, you have really weird thoughts like how to tie a traffic cone or nail a barrel of cheese to the wall. If you're like me, anyway. The exact nature of this sleep onset mentation is kind of a mystery in the sense that no one knows quite how to classify them. They're not quite dreams, and yet they're not quite waking thought either. And yet, these little flashes of color foreshadow the dreams to come later in the night. But first, before we get there, we first have to contend with the wave. It's called the slow wave, and we descend into it every night. Or rather, the slow wave descends into us. In some ways, it is the most mysterious state of consciousness we possess. In slow wave sleep, our ability to form short-term memories is disengaged. So whatever we experience in that dark abyss, we leave there. We drop into the slow wave for about 40 minutes in total, most of it in the first half of the night. The slow wave looks beautiful on an EEG machine. Big electrical swells roll across the whole of the cortex. It's the deepest stage of sleep, a long, slow drift into a dark blue sea. You think I could have memorized that part? Most sleep scientists think there's very little awareness happening in slow wave. What thoughts we do have tend to be bland and prosaic. We think about the laundry or our taxes. Just the gentle drift of mental flotsam swimming through our minds and interrupting our peace. That's supposed to represent our thoughts, that little dude. But there's also intriguing evidence which contradicts the idea that the slow wave is somehow empty. Many people woken up from slow wave sleep report incredibly vivid dreams. And this is what's most surprising of all, long-term meditators who claim to be able to enter into slow wave sleep like they're peeking their heads into a barn loft. They say it's a state that is an intense state of bliss in which we are paradoxically the most aware. And this is the insane thing about all this stuff I'm talking about. There are these states which we think of as being inaccessible that in fact you can enter into like the rooms in a house. I just want to make that point. But right now we're moving back up to one of my favorite states of consciousness. It's called the watch. Or I call it the watch anyway. Few people realize that, like deep sea divers coming up for air, most of us surface into wakefulness 10 to 12 times a night. Usually these wake-ups are so short that we forget them. But sometimes they're longer. In fact, there's intriguing scientific and historical evidence to suggest that humans once slept in 2 segments instead of 1. We slept once in the late evening and again later in the early morning. And in between, for a few protected hours, we breached the surface of sleep into an altered state of consciousness called the watch. If the watch is celebrated and not simply endured, it can be a luxurious state. High levels of prolactin circulate in the blood, a hormone thought to be associated with an almost meditative calm. In the watch, we skip along the surface of sleep, bobbing back and forth between waking and dreaming. Our waking images informed by dreaming thought, and our dreaming images informed by waking concerns. It's as if we are looking inside, but also out, each state mixing into the other in all kinds of novel and wonderful ways. One scientist I spoke to said the watch represented a kind of corridor of influence between our dreaming and waking minds, a corridor that has been carelessly slammed shut by our modern obsession with staying up late and getting insane numbers of things done. But eventually, the ocean does win out, and we plunge down again, this time into the REM dream. The dream world is a strange one. I think of a dream as a kind of caricature of the self. The narratives we find ourselves in are not neutral. Rather, they unfold according to our own, often unconscious expectations and assumptions about the world. This dream world is often filled with threats and challenges. We usually respond to them in an exaggerated manner, so that emotions like fear and joy and anger all balloon grotesquely. In fact, without sensory input to constrain the mind, dream objects too have a tendency to balloon to extremes. I call this the law of extrema. It's one of the many dream world laws I document in the book, which are to the dreaming world what the laws of physics are to the waking world. All this, of course, makes dreams insanely cool. It can also make them frenetic and idiotic. We're often on the move in dreams, racing around trying to get somewhere and get something done. There's a vaudevillian absurdity to the situations we find ourselves in. We're constantly being interrupted and distracted and frustrated and persecuted. Or we're trying to get away from a threat, running as fast as we can without seeming to get anywhere. Perhaps we secretly expect we will be caught, and so the dream narrative unfolds accordingly. One thing is clear, most of the time, no matter how absurd the situation we find ourselves in, we don't question our dream. We're just witless actors in a production we can't control, submitting to the director's every whim. We're in the grip of what some psychologists call the shallow moment-by-moment mind, and are thus unable to question what the dream world forces down our throats. But occasionally, usually early in the morning, something wonderful can happen. We wake up inside the dream. It's called lucid dreaming, and it's what happens when we realize the entire dream we've been inhabiting is a fiction, and in so doing we're able to see it with fresh eyes. When this happens, the entire sensory dynamic of the dream can change. Everything gets very clear and very colorful and occasionally exultant. Lucid dreaming is a real phenomenon of interest to more than just the New Age crowd. Scientists and philosophers are interested in lucid dreaming because it seems to defy normal dream psychology. Instead of witless actors in a production we can't control, we develop agency and self-consciousness. And with that, all of these waking faculties, reason, memory, intentionality, they all of them come back online, and we can walk through our dreams, this mishmash of memories, in full possession of our senses, so to speak. And what our senses appearing to show us can sometimes defy belief. It's like stepping into a gorgeous pixelated virtual world, a perfect impressionist painting courtesy of our amazing world-building minds. But there's no need to get religious about it, because lucid dreaming is also insanely fun. Because now you can do whatever you want. You can explore new worlds. You can have sex with that Sears catalog model you've been eyeing for weeks. You can interrogate dream characters. In theory, you can have any experience your heart desires. Remember how you used to love to fly in your dreams when you were a kid? But it's time to come home. Lucid dreaming is a chance to be a kid again and become what every single kid wants to be. A goddamn superhero. Okay, pause, Mike. So how many people have had an experience at least sort of like that sometime in their life? Raise their hands. They've ever flown or jumped or had awesome powers. Did you enjoy that? Yeah. Would you like to do that again? Yeah. Would you like to see that again? Yeah. Let's do it again! I love that part. Okay, vibe change. It doesn't last. As with all dreams, eventually it comes to an end, and even Spider-Man has to come back and down and into reality. We're back at the sensory gateway, except this time, as circadian processes stir in our bodies, we prepare to move from the sleep and dreaming side to the waking side. This state of consciousness is called the hypnopompic. In this state, the real world and the dream world can overlap like animated Venn diagrams. Sounds from the real world intrude into dreams, and images from the dream world intrude into waking. It's a space of strange hallucinations and dissociations where we often wake confused, and if we wake in a strange bed, it can take some time to reorient ourselves. In fact, we still have our moment-by-moment dream brains on. Scientists call this phenomenon sleep inertia. It's a kind of impairment, which means it's not a great time to operate heavy machinery. But we're in waking now, and things are about to start moving a little more quickly. From our early morning grogginess, we rise into the day on a circadian tide of alertness, and we don our super cool yellow ski jumpsuits. This means it's a very good time for physical activity, which to the athlete means a state of consciousness called the zone. The zone is pure efficiency in the brain, everything running smoothly and automatically. The second you get self-conscious in the zone, you mess everything up. So you need to keep thinking to a minimum, just like 007. James Bond is basically a poster boy for the zone. He just shoots people in the face and goes off awesome jumps and never sweats the cognitive stuff. In the zone, everything is a habit of turning out just right, and if you do it with a dash of style, it can be beautiful. Cue the Union Jack parachute. Now strap yourself in, because the next state of consciousness is a very intense one. It's the ideal time for an even more mysterious state, and it's called the zone. Sorry, it's called trance. Forget what I said. It's called trance. The trance is like the black hole of the mind. It sucks in focal awareness and shears off peripheral attention. Those spontaneous trance experiences are perfectly natural. They can be so absorbing that we lose touch with the outside world. Dissociations happen. They happen a lot in states of consciousness. Can happen in the brain, and our minds play tricks on us. Sometimes we hear voices that aren't there. We get locked into an entirely different kind of logic. Now watch closely. Feel yourself let go. Stare in the center. Hypnotists take advantage of the trance state to impose specific suggestions on subjects. Stare at the dot.
Buy Jeff's book. Buy Jeff's book. Buy Jeff's book.
Buy Jeff a beer at the
Jeff's
bar.
book.
You will all be my slaves after tonight. We will move en masse to the Drake and make it destroy it! We will make it destroy it, as they always say. In the trance, our own movements and actions may come as a surprise to us. Some of us behave like puppets, or if you prefer, like zombies. Dance, you fools! Dance, you zombies! Since there really is no better way to end a talk than with a YouTube video of Filipino inmates dancing en masse to Michael Jackson's Thriller, that's how I'm going to stop tonight. Thank you. Though I've dealt here with some of the more lurid flavors of dreaming and waking consciousness, there are many more in the book. Special kinds of alertness, daydreaming, different meditative states. The range of experiences we're capable of having in our own minds will thrill you.